Is the growing isolation of WikiLeaks the start of the end for the online secret site? What right do companies like MasterCard and PayPal have to refuse to do business with it? And with the enemies massing at the gates, who can WikiLeaks call on to stay afloat financially? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. David Foster with you here. Any way it can, the Goliath that is the US government is bringing its full weight down on WikiLeaks. It's operating illegally in the US, says the State Department, demanding a shutdown of all accounts, transfers or deposits to the controversial website. So what do you do when a big corporate name such as Visa casts you adrift? Is the cyber backlash by WikiLeaks fans going to be enough? Well, you know the saying, a week is a long time in politics. It also seems to apply to WikiLeaks finances. In just 7 days, supporters were prevented from having access and making donations, to some extent cutting off the site's lifeline. Trouble began on December the 1st, when Amazon, which hosted WikiLeaks servers in the United States, cut off ties. Amazon argues it's because WikiLeaks breached a contract, not because of political pressure. The online payment company PayPal was next. It stopped members from making donations. PayPal's vice president says the firm had been contacted by the US State Department. MasterCard and Visa Europe followed suit and started suspending the use of their cards on WikiLeaks. But payments can still be made through this company, Flutter. The joint British-Swedish firm says it's seen no evidence in those two countries that WikiLeaks is doing anything illegal. Joining us now to discuss this issue, our guests here in Doha, Mark Farha, visiting professor at the School of Foreign Service of Georgetown University. In Birmingham, in Middle England, Jonathan Hemus, founder and director of Insignia, a PR firm specialising in crisis communications. And via broadband from Basel in Switzerland, Andreas Fink, chief executive of DataCell. Good to have all three of you on the programme. Andres, let me start with you first of all and try and summarise what DataCell does. It provides servers and it stores credit card information for WikiLeaks. At least you did until what happened on December the 7th. Tell us what that was.
Well, DataCell, first and all, is a data center company, and one of our services is to provide payment services for our customers. And as such, we provide payment service to WikiLeaks. So if people pay via Visa or MasterCard, we charge the card and give the money to WikiLeaks. That's our job. And on 7th of December, we got a notice from our payment backend processor saying that Visa has instructed them to suspend us for 7 days, so they can complete the due diligence if the payments to WikiLeaks is not going to hurt their brand or hurt them financially in some way.
But it also said, because you sent us the email, Andres, it also said that that 7-day suspension could continue indefinitely.
Yeah, that's true.
So you went out, spoke to other credit card companies besides MasterCard and Visa, and they said to you, yeah, we've had contact with the State Department on this issue too.
Yeah, I contacted another credit card company, a smaller one, who indirectly then confirmed that they cannot accept payments for WikiLeaks because the US government has intervened.
You don't think it was simply because of this, quote, due diligence? You do seriously think there was political pressure put on these companies?
Well, it's very simple. We have been doing donations for WikiLeaks since almost 2 months. We started in October. And, out of a sudden, the donations increased because of the big press releases and because PayPal is closing down. And then out of a sudden, I get to know that Visa and MasterCard are no longer allowing donations to WikiLeaks over the press. I mean, they didn't approach us saying anything is wrong. And for us, it's a very clear case. WikiLeaks is not illegal in any way, in our way. So it shouldn't be illegal for us to process donations. and the donations come from all over the world, really from every kind of individual. So to me, it's very clear that Visa and the MasterCard are just doing what their government is telling them to do, but they're not telling us the truth because they're afraid that we going after them, which we really do want to do.
Thanks, Andreas. Stay with us, of course. We're going to turn to Mark Faho, who's with us here in Doha, visiting Professor of Government at Georgetown University, on a spell here in Qatar. Do you think there's any doubt that the US government is arm twisting here?
Well, no, on the face of it, I think it's clear. Yes, there is a witch hunt going on against WikiLeaks. But the question I would like to pose is related to the broader picture. I mean, what are we getting here? The quantity of WikiLeaks data is impressive, but the quality is not. We've discovered precious few new items through WikiLeaks, and in exchange what we're getting is this global crackdown on WikiLeaks in particular, but in general a threat sort of to the freedom of the internet. So I think the repercussions of this whole affair show some ominous signs.
Is the US government doing this then not because it's worried about the material that's out there, but because it wants to prove a point that it can quash any kind of dissent if it chooses to do so?
I would think so, given, I mean, at least to set a precedent. And bear in mind that there have been ideas paneled in the U.S., most particularly by Joseph Lieberman, to enable the president, in fact, to have a red button to shut down the internet as a whole. So, and if we take the Patriot Act, for instance, as a precedent, we also see that civil liberties were curtailed there, unsuspectingly so. So, in wake of this war on terror, which is, of course, to a large degree a legitimate war on terror, we should be on guard that our civil liberties are not curtailed.
In essence, suppose this is about the high price you can end up paying for free speech. For almost 50 years, America has had a Freedom of Information Act, and that gives people a right to ask for secret government information. The words used by the US leader in 1966. Well, they show a very different attitude then compared to today. Former President Lyndon Johnson said, "This legislation springs from one of our most successful principles. Democracy works best when people have access to all information that the security of the nation permits. No one should be able to pull curtains of secrecy around decisions which can be revealed without injury to the public interest." So back to you, Mark, on this one. Is the information that's out there in any sense a danger to national security?
So far, no. It's been a danger to regional peace and stability because it's raised tensions between Sunni and Shia and between the factions in Lebanon, for instance. But Lyndon Johnson is a poor choice to sort of a poor poster child for transparency. He was known for his backroom deals. JFK has a similar quote saying that secrecy is repugnant to a free society, and I trust him more in that regard. Obama, one should add, has rejected more Freedom of Information Act requests than even Bush did in his entire tenure. So even though Obama claimed that he would create the most transparent administration in history, in point of fact, he has betrayed that promise.
When they take a look at the Act closely, the Freedom of Information Act, it has some exemptions. I'm going to read one out now. I want to know whether you think these documents in any way fall into this category. There are 9 exemptions. Number 1, properly classified documents in the interests of national defence or foreign policy need not be divulged. In that category or not?
No, these are not top secret documents, right? As I said before, 95% is, if you want to call it, diplomatic trivia. I mean, almost sort of adolescent, puerile conversations between low-level diplomats. No names are mentioned that we didn't know before. No real secrets revealed. So it only, by and large, is information which already was, to a large degree, in the public sphere. It just makes it more explicit, and as I said before, by officially attributing the statements we all knew, for instance, certain Gulf leaders said, it raises the tension and creates in this regard embarrassment, not so much for the U.S., I would dare say, but for the regional leaders and situations. So.
Julian Assange's Swiss bank account, which was run by the Swiss Post Office, that was also shut down. Some suggestion that that had nothing to do with political pressure. What's your feeling on that one, that it might just be Swiss laws that he's not allowed to have an account?
Yeah, I believe that is correct, technically speaking, that legally speaking, he was not a resident of Switzerland. I'm a Swiss citizen, and I have friends there who have told me this in the legal sphere, that he was not a Swiss citizen, and you're not allowed to have a post account if you're not a citizen of Switzerland or a resident of Switzerland. So, but that does not sort of gainsay the fact that, yes, there has been a witch hunt, at least on the face of it, against Julian Assange.
Okay. Go to the UK. Talk to Jonathan Hemus now, Chief Executive of Insignia. Jonathan, one of your jobs is sitting down with people who are in a spot of bother and saying this is how you sort these things out for yourselves. What do you think was going through the minds of the chief executives of MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, all of these people who've suddenly gone, look, we don't want to know you, WikiLeaks. What would they have been thinking? What was their reasoning for doing this?
Well, clearly, corporate reputation takes years to build up, but in a crisis like this, it can be destroyed very, very quickly. And I think the people running the organisations we're talking about, the MasterCards, the Visas, the PayPals, they're wrestling with a real challenge. Do we bow to pressure, if indeed there is pressure, and cut off funding to WikiLeaks? Or do we protect free speech and leave that funding in place? And what they're trying to make their minds up about is what is going to be in the best long-term reputational interest of the organisation concerned. And I think that very much depends on the individual values that underlie those organisations and the relative importance of the stakeholders with whom they are dealing. Frankly, from a reputational point of view alone, I think maybe some of the more contemporary internet organisations like PayPal and like Amazon are maybe more vulnerable in reputational terms because they are very modern, contemporary organisations who've made a lot of money and built their business on the freedom and the speed of the internet. So for them to be doing something which may be perceived as going against that could actually be more damaging to their reputation than those that are maybe the more establishment organisations.
But is it also equally possible that by ditching WikiLeaks, which has a pretty big worldwide following, they could be also damaging their reputation, and certain people say, look, I'm not going to use them anymore?
Absolutely. I think this is a big call for those organisations, and as I said, there's a tension here that if they do cut off the funding, then exactly what you say may happen. They can be seen to be stifling freedom of speech and suffer the backlash. If they don't, they can be seen by government and others to be helping to fund an organisation which poses a security risk potentially. And making that judgment call, I guess, is what senior management is there to do ultimately. But as I say, I think the key thing is the organisation needs to act according to its own values and principles. Yes, bear in mind the influence and the persuasion and the impact on all of the various stakeholders that the organisation comes into contact with, but it then must do what is right according to its own values and principles. I think, though, one of the things that may potentially have been underestimated is that historically government was a very, very powerful influencer. Today, with the spread of social media, as we've seen during this incident, consumer power is so much stronger, so much more vocal than ever before, that perhaps the power of government, the overriding power of government, is not quite such a big influencer as it was a number of years back.
I'm going to come back to you in just a moment, Jonathan, because I want to ask you what advice you might give WikiLeaks itself. But let's bring back in Andreas Fink, who's been listening to this conversation from Basel in Switzerland. Is it possible for you at the moment at all to do any business for WikiLeaks?
No, we are just doing the credit card transactions for WikiLeaks, and that has been shut down by Visa and MasterCard. And, all the donations are basically impossible to do at this moment.
But it is possible to get money to them in other ways, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're not involved in that part, but there are the possibility of doing wire transfers or send physical cash. but it's clear that most users, especially if they are from the United States, they're much more used to using credit cards. And if you send physical cash, there's a risk that it can get lost. If you do a wire transfer, you might face quite high transfer costs. So, you know, to donate, if you want to donate 10 euros, it might cost you $20 to do this. So it becomes quite ridiculous.
Yeah, and indeed, a lot of the donations are of the smaller kind. Let me ask you one other thing. When it comes to WikiLeaks itself and dealing with WikiLeaks, has this hurt or enhanced your company's reputation?
That's a good question. In one way, it has hurt us, of course, because we cannot do business right now with Visa and MasterCard, and you know, they basically own the credit card market. I don't know how big, but I assume like 90% of the credit card transactions of the world go through those two companies. So in that way, it hurts. On the other hand, you know, it gave us some interesting feedback from people. We get a lot of feedback that people would, you know, hold us up for standing up and against those big forces, because everybody else seems to be afraid from the U.S. government, and we're not. I mean, we have laws in Switzerland and we have laws in Iceland which protect those kind of things. And what scares me most, actually, is that the U.S. government is able to put pressure on those companies, and they don't even question that. I mean, we have laws. If somebody comes to me in Switzerland and they say, I have to close down my business because of whatever, then the answer would be, well, get an injunction from a judge. And you know, if the judge says it's illegal, then it's easy.
Yeah, let's put that point to Mark Faha. Looking at this from the government's point of view, how much leverage would they have had over companies like Amazon, PayPal, MasterCard, and all of those who have now said to WikiLeaks, we don't want to touch you at the moment?
I think, again, judging from the aftermath of 9/11, quite a bit. I remember then that pressure was put, for instance, on Swiss banks at that point to reveal accounts, et cetera, and that was done promptly. So, yes, I think they have leverage.
And in the longer term, do you think these companies are going to kowtow to the U.S. government ad infinitum?
Well, you have to ask that. I can't speak for Visa and MasterCard, to be honest, so I can't tell you that. But,
what do you think, not only as a professor but also as an American citizen, about the way that the U.S. government is approaching this? Is it making it a bigger problem, perhaps, for itself than it need to have been, or is there something darker behind all of this?
Well, yeah, I have my suspicions about the whole affair, even about Julian Assange, to be frank, because he comes from a murky background. He was affiliated with intelligence agencies. And we have, for instance, President Obama last year appointed somebody called Cass Sunstein as the head of the Office of Information. And this reminds me of sort of the ministries of information we used to have here in the Arab world and elsewhere in Soviet countries. And one of his premises was that the government should infiltrate social networking sites, should plant false conspiracy theories, should raise sort of false have these false flag operations of sorts, psych-op operations, etc. So if you read his paper, which he wrote at Harvard on this issue, you will find that a lot of it rings eerily familiar to what is going on today.
You're going to have to help me a little bit here, because I'm not quite sure I would, if I was in charge of the US government, I'd want to see a lot of that stuff out there, whether it's dangerous, against the interests of national security, or simply embarrassing. Why would they want it to get out?
But how much of it has in fact been embarrassing to the U.S. government, and how much of it has been embarrassing to, again, I repeat, Arab leaders or China? I mean, we knew China was spying on Google. We knew a lot of Arab leaders had suspicions about Iran, etc. We knew about Putin. We knew about Berlusconi. A lot of this is trivia. And all it really does, if you drop the balance sheet at the end, in my view, is it doesn't really embarrass the U.S. government. There are no real state secrets revealed. Nobody's going to be held accountable in Washington. At best, it could serve the interest of those who are, for instance, agitating within the CIA or the government for a war against Iran, for, putting more pressure on China, etc. These agendas are served by WikiLeaks thus far. I don't see much in the ways of sort of leading to real change in Washington.
And let's go to the UK, back to Birmingham. Jonathan Hemus there. I suggested that give you a couple of minutes to think about how you might advise WikiLeaks itself on sorting out its problems. But in a sense, I mean, the oxygen of publicity has been fantastic for it. Do you think it needs any help?
Well, I was going to make exactly that point. I think one of the things that WikiLeaks probably doesn't need is advice on public relations. It's done a fantastic job of getting this story across, and interestingly, it's done that both via conventional media, but also very much driven by social and online media as well. And it's done one of the things that all good PR campaigns do. It has utilised the influence of third parties to carry its message for it, to the extent now that a lot of this story is being driven by third parties rather than by WikiLeaks itself. So purely from a PR point of view, it's done a superb job in getting this story across.
What do you make of Mark Farhar's suggestion that all of this could have been put out there on purpose by the US government?
Frankly, it's something that I wouldn't have any particular knowledge of. I think from the point of view of the organisations that we're discussing now, the MasterCards and the Visas and the PayPals, I bet they wished it hadn't been put out there, because it has given them an enormous crisis management challenge that maybe they couldn't have anticipated. Good crisis communication is often about the planning and preparing for it. This is potentially a situation that they hadn't planned or prepared for. And of course, there's a second crisis for them as well, which is the bringing down of their websites, or the difficulty that people are having to pay for goods using their services, which is a secondary crisis. People are now asking, how robust are their systems and how secure is my information? So they actually have a double crisis to deal with.
Back to Basel and Andreas Fink. I mean, you're at the sharp end of this. You're waiting to find out if, in fact, Visa, MasterCard will start to do business through you with WikiLeaks once again. But I want to ask you about the physical amount of money that was coming through your system. I don't want you to give me confidential information, but did you see the amount, the number of donations go up pretty rapidly once WikiLeaks got all these headlines?
Well, this is clear. You know, the more people know about WikiLeaks, the more donations you're going to get. Because, you know, people who don't know about WikiLeaks, they cannot donate. And the second effect, which we have seen, is when PayPal was cut down, that the amount has jumped up, which means that a lot of people were donating over PayPal before, because, you know, internet users or frequent internet users who understand the freedom of speech issues in the internet and who understand what WikiLeaks does, are the ones who are going to donate most likely, and they all used PayPal. And when PayPal was gone, our volumes have increased.
Just a quick thought from you before we have to go, Andreas. Do you think in a few days' time Visa and MasterCard are going to come back to you and say, yep, OK, we'll carry on doing business with WikiLeaks, we think you're in the clear? Or is that it, do you think?
Well, actually, we don't know. I mean, we had the due diligence process being completed the last few days by the payment processor, and they go back to Visa, and then it's a decision Visa has to take.
Thank you very much indeed. We look forward to hearing from you, Andreas. Tell us whether, in fact, you got the business back online with WikiLeaks. Our thanks also to our other guests. Doha, Mark Farhar; in Birmingham, Jonathan Hemus; and, as we saw, via broadband from Basel in Switzerland, Andreas Fink. Thank you, too, for watching this edition of Inside Story. Drop us a line if you like. Email us at aljazeera.net, preceded by Inside Story. Inside Story at aljazeera.net. From me, David Foster. Goodbye for now.